What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network. And today we're talking the latest episode of WWE Untold on the APA. Now, I'm not sure why they chose now to air this documentary. I'm not sure if it was like the anniversary of the tag team. From what I could gather, they debuted in November of 1998. It's currently February. Now, I know this went up on Super Bowl Sunday, yesterday morning on the WWE Network, so I'm not sure if they timed it with that because both guys are former football players, and they talk about that a lot in the beginning of the documentary. So that's the only correlation I can think of. It just felt really random, of all times, to now get a documentary on the APA. Maybe it's because JBL is going into the Hall of Fame in a couple of months, I think anyway. I think they're still doing the Hall of Fame this year. He was supposed to go in last year. We've heard nothing about that since then. So I assume we're getting the ceremony this year. And one of the people that was set to be inducted was JBL. So that's probably why, but they never... I don't know, it just seemed random. But I'm not complaining because this was really, really good. All the Untolds are usually excellent, and this was no exception. Focusing on the upbringing and the careers pre and in WWE of Ron Simmons and JBL, collectively known as the Acolytes, a.k.a. the APA. So we start off with Ron Simmons, who talked about how he grew up the hard way, that his dad abandoned him and his brothers growing up, but he got into pro wrestling because of his grandmother. And with JBL, he watched wrestling with his grandfather. And I'll kind of go back and forth here because they don't really talk about like just Ron Simmons and then just JBL. They intersplice both of their backstories kind of into one, so if I go back and forth, that's why. Ron Simmons' first love in terms of sports was baseball, whereas with JBL, it was always football. Simmons eventually went into football. He was told by his coaches that he'd be perfect for the sport, and he was. Ended up doing so well that he got inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, which is cool. JBL also did very well in football. Made All-States, became an All-American. With Ron Simmons, he saw Lex Luger made the transition from football to wrestling. And when he saw Luger make that transition, he thought that he could do it too. And at the time, according to him, there weren't many black wrestlers. So he thought it was something that he could do really, really well, excel at, thrive at, and make a career out of. So he had to work his way up before he eventually won the WCW World Championship in 1992. The WCW World Heavyweight title from Vader at one of the 1992 WCW events. And just absolutely a historic, amazing moment. The crowd reaction was great. I'm glad they went into detail about that. And I feel like I've discussed this before. I don't know if it was in another documentary or if it was on that moment specifically. I've seen it a million times, the footage. I'm just not sure if they talked about it in a different documentary that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. But he talked about how winning that world championship specifically to him and what that meant for him to be the first black world champion in wrestling meant everything to him. With JBL, he started wrestling in Texas, kind of had to work his way up as well before arriving in WWE in 1995. They went with the name Justin Hawk Bradshaw to begin with. He doesn't know where Bradshaw came from. His real name is John. But Hawk, he was already using that on like the indie scene before he came to WWE. His mindset was that when he eventually gets fired from the company because he figured he would not last long, he could just go back to using the Hawk name and it would have some notoriety because he was in WWE. So he became Justin Hawk Bradshaw from the get-go. And he remembers being in awe of WrestleMania 12. Because, again, he arrived in 95. WrestleMania 12 was in 96. I'm not sure if he was on the show, but WrestleMania 12 was a great show. I don't feel like that gets talked about enough in terms of being one of the better WrestleManias. But between even like the Taker and Diesel match, I thought was really good. It wasn't a stacked card just because the Iron Man match took up a majority of the show. But that was obviously a great main event. It really is a really, really good show. So then they bring in Ron Simmons, who is now known as Farouk. Vince saw Ron as a Farouk character. Why Farouk? I have no idea. He has no idea why his name was Farouk. That was just the name they gave him because that's what Vince saw him as. So he gave him this goofy-ass outfit with a blue leather helmet, and he was thinking, okay, if it's like this metal helmet and I can make it badass, I would look cool. He didn't look cool. He looked like a fucking idiot. And the gimmick almost killed him from the get-go. And again, this is the same guy who a couple of years earlier was the first black world champion in wrestling. And then you have that same guy come in and then dressed like a complete scrub, So I can only imagine if the internet was around today what the reaction to that would be. But he wanted to make the most out of it, and he did. And obviously the Nation of Domination formed, and maybe, you know what, maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's where I saw the footage, was when I did the review of WWE Timeline on the Nation of Domination. Late last year, they did a timeline on that, and they probably talked about it there because obviously Simmons was part of the group. But anyway, so they talk about how the two of them had a lot in common, from playing football, being very hard-hitting, drinking outside of the ring a lot. They had a lot in common, did JBL and Ron Simmons. So they immediately became friends. They were already traveling together even before they became an on-air tag team. And at the time, in 98, creative had nothing for either of them. JBL was stunned because Ron Simmons was obviously a legend, was already making history, had already made a lot of history. The fact that creative would have nothing for him coming off the Nation of Domination run was baffling to him. For him, he wasn't surprised. He was not surprised at all that 3 years into his WWE run, he'd already been broken up from his tag team partner, and it just wasn't going well for him. But they eventually were put together as a tag team because, again, creative had nothing for them, and they debuted on the November 22nd, 1998 edition of Heat. And they were introduced by none other than Jackal, who obviously is now known as Don Callis. So, yeah, he did have a very brief WWF run. I think a lot of people already knew that. You know, Don Callis was not there for very long, but I think, you know, he's a great manager now for Kenny Omega. He would have been huge in WWE had they utilized him properly, and I think they offered him a role in creative. He talked about this in some interview he did, I believe with Chris Van Vliet not too long ago. And he turned it down because he wanted to be a wrestling manager and do other stuff and leave the business ultimately entirely before coming back about 5-6 years ago. But yeah, so Don Callis was technically on this, or not even technically, he was on this episode of Untold, which was cool. So back to the APA, who were then known as the Acolytes. They were based on devil worshippers, which is why they had like that, the signs and the marks on their chest and all over their bodies. That's why they were given the Acolytes name. It was from something else. I forgot what they said. But they got put in Ministry of Darkness soon after. And it just kind of worked. The gimmick worked with them. It got him off to a solid start. And with JBL and Ron was really good in the ring, according to JBL. And he was. Ron was really, really good. A lot of people kind of mistake him for, oh, he's the damn guy. But he was a lot more than that. And he also wrestled a very hard-hitting style, as did JBL. So that's why they worked so well together as partners. They told this story about, and I'm not too sure about this one, I'm sure it's true, but it didn't exactly paint them in the best of light, even though I understood what they were trying to go for. Now, this is public knowledge, the story has been shared before, but I'm actually kind of surprised that they would share this on a WWE documentary, because this would not go over well today if it actually happened. So, Public Enemy, the tag team from ECW, they were brought into WWE probably in 99, I think. I think this was definitely pre-Dudley Boys. They were brought in, did not last long at all. They obviously either weren't very good or they just had a lot of backstage issues. I can't say if they weren't good because they haven't seen enough matches of theirs to say like firmly, oh, they're not good. But they were good enough to be brought into WWE. They were given a chance, and it was entirely their fault that they fucked it up. Entirely their fault. So the APA here tell this story about how they were supposed to have a match. And they arrived late already that day, so that alone did not do them any favors. But then to add even more shit on top of that, as their music was playing, they went out first, and they told JBL as their music was playing right before they walked out, hey, I know we're supposed to do a table spot tonight, we don't want to do it. And that was it. So then APA, I don't condone this, I don't think they should have done this, but it's a different time. They took matters into their own hands. And again, the fact they're sharing this on the documentary very much surprised me. So they go out there and they're like, well, if they don't want to do the table spot, then we'll take the table spot to them. So they just beat the shit out of these guys. Like completely stiff them, shoot on them, put them through the table anyway, hit the Dominator on them very viciously. I'm not sure if that was their final match, but they did not last long in WWE, did Public Enemy, and they were gone soon after. So their own backstage attitude issues did them in, but I'm not sure if the APA bullying them. Listen, I'm not condoning that they should have said no to the spot. If that's the spot, you do what you're told to do. But the fact they took matters into their own hands, again, I know it was a different time. It kind of goes back to what Undertaker said recently on the Joe Rogan podcast about, oh, wrestlers are too soft nowadays. I mean, some of the shit they were doing back then was just fucking reckless, and this was one of them. If you see the footage, you'll know that they probably should not have done that. But anyway, they were all about having a fun time. They were known for their drinking outside of the ring. People wanted to go party and drink and hang out with them because they were so cool. And they also shared a story about getting drunk at the TV hotel one day, and they thought they were done. Vince and Shane had to drive them, I think, to the hotel. So they knew that Vince and Shane knew. JBL and Ron knew that. And they were already discussing the next morning, oh shit, we fucked up. Like, do you still have that contact over in Japan? Like, they were back in their bags ready to go. Because they knew when they arrived at TV that next day that they were getting fired. Sure enough, JBL arrives at the arena, gets called into Vince's office, but Vince has this giant grin on his face. And they bring up the story about how they were drunk. Like, he knew that, but he was like, hey, that drinking thing, put it on TV. Do it on TV. So that's how they became the APA. Becoming the Acolytes Protection Agency. And they weren't even wrestling for a while. They were mostly known for their backstage stuff and for the bar fights they were doing. They would make people walk through their door. They were like, they would hang up, and you know what I'm talking about if you've seen their skits, but, they would hang out backstage, and they would literally just have a door frame with a door, and that was it. Just a random door that led nowhere. And they would make people walk through the door, which was just hilarious. So anyway, everyone wanted to play cards with them and be a part of the skits because they were always entertaining. And Ron Simmons, very briefly, I was very interested to see, hear more about this, but it was kind of like a passing comment. It was like a 10-second thing where Simmons said that it was supposed to become about racial inequality or racial equality or whatever. I mean, they already did that with the Nation of Domination, kind of, so I was kind of surprised. I had never heard that before. I was kind of surprised that they would do it with the APA. I'm not even really sure what it would have been, because obviously JBL is white, so I'm not sure if it would have become a race thing. He was talking about the tag team, so I'm not sure if, they were supposed to break up and make it a race thing. I have no idea. But he had mentioned it was supposed to be about race. Someone had brought up it was supposed to be this racial thing, and they said no, because it's not about race. Like, it got to the point where they were so close that Ron Simmons said this, that someone at the airport mistook them for being twins. Took them, or whatever the word would be. Thought they were brothers because they were that close and they did all the same shit, which is just hilarious. So anyway, he discusses the origin of the damn catchphrase and that some things can only be described in one word, being damn. And he discusses the origin of that. They don't spend too much time on that. They talk about the series of matches they had with the Dudley Boys and how well they worked together. They always beat the hell out of each other. Public Enemy came and left. The Dudley Boys were another ECW tag team. They were the exact opposite of Public Enemy. They had a better run in WWE than they ever did in ECW, and they had a good run over there. But they were in WWE for many, many years, had a great run in Impact, came back to WWE a few years ago. One of the all-time great tag teams. They had great matches, people cared about the characters, and more importantly, they were hard-hitting and physical and real in the ring. So these two teams had a great series of matches, resulting in the APA winning the tag titles from them in 2001. JBL said he would have been happy doing the APA thing forever, but Simmons knew that it wasn't going to last. He knew that JBL had breakout single-star potential. He always told him, he said, that he would be a future world champion. And he was already ready to retire. He was getting ready to retire, and JBL was mad. They were already taking him off TV in early 2004. They were taking Simmons off TV, already preparing JBL for that big singles push, and that bothered JBL. But Simmons was like, listen, you got singles potential. You're ready to become world champion. Just run with it. Like, don't worry about me. And that's when JBL turned into this great singles heel in 2004, went on to reign as WWE champion for 280 days or something like that, going into WrestleMania 21 before he lost it to John Cena. And he said that Simmons was very instrumental in his success. He would not have become the success story that he did as a single star had it not been for Ron Simmons. And he said that Ron Simmons taught him how to be a man, and JBL said he knew it was historic. He could feel history being made when he was given the honor of inducting Simmons into the WWE Hall of Fame. This is crazy, but 9 years ago. It doesn't feel like it was 9 years ago, but he inducted him into the WWE Hall of Fame 9 years ago. Meant a lot to both guys, and they discuss how close they are, how really, really close they are. They love each other. And Simmons said that JBL is basically family to him. He has a lot of kind words to say about JBL, which is really, really cool. So that closed out the documentary at around, again, 33 minutes. It's a good watch. I don't know a shit ton about the APA, but this didn't really teach me a lot I didn't already know. But it was still enjoyable, and again, I'm not exactly sure what the anniversary would be, or if it was done to prep for JBL's Hall of Fame induction in a few months. I'm not exactly sure. But this was still good stuff. I enjoyed it for as long as it lasted, and I think it's well worth checking out the APA edition of WWE Untold. Check out all my other WWE Untold reviews in the description box down below. They're all right there. All the episodes. They've done episodes on Mick Foley and Taker inside Hell in the Cell in 1998. They've done one on Eddie Guerrero's SmackDown stint, Sting's WWE debut, his last match in WWE. The most recent one, I think, was the Goldberg one in December, which was about his streak. No, actually, I'm sorry. The last one was AJ Styles. That one came out a couple of weeks ago, and I reviewed that one, and I saw it ahead of time, and it was really, really good. So, yeah, these Untold are always excellent and always well worth watching, so check it out right now on the WWE Network, WWE Untold, the APA. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Hit the bell button as well to be notified every time a new video goes up. And again, we're inching closer and closer to 5,000 subscribers, so if you're not already subscribed, what the hell are you waiting for? Do it right now, and please, please, please help me reach that 5,000 subscriber mark sooner rather than later. And if you haven't already heard, we have interviews here on the channel with Casey Catanzaro, AJ Styles, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Keith Lee, Roman Reigns, Fandango, Apollo Crews, and so much more. Edge, the Royal Rumble winner, that's the most recent interview that dropped a couple days ago, and more to come in the days and weeks to come. If you're not already subscribed, again, I cannot stress it enough, please do so, I would appreciate it. Have a great one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.